6:34. The date's Wednesday, August 14th, 2024. Commissioner Jim Franklin is absent, and Commissioner Brian Payne is absent. Commissioners McFarland, and Buzz Artiano are here by Zoom, and so we have...
Dot is not here yet, so let's say she's absent.
Oh, we're
for the
waiting
time
on
being.
Dot? All right. I think I could still open the meeting
Yep, you're good.
and take a roll call. Colina's here, Megan's here. Megan, you can say it. And Marilyn? Here. Also here. Please note we're doing a... And Buzz?
Yeah.
You're here. Okay, thank you. Please note we're doing a hybrid meeting, and that's in person and virtual attendance. If a member of the virtual public would like to make comments during a public hearing, please use that raise hand function on Zoom, and you'll be assigned a speaking time. If you're listening in via telephone dial-in, press *9. That'll raise your hand, and then press *6 to unmute yourself. This meeting's being recorded by the local scene, and we're very grateful and thank them. And a record of this meeting will be posted on the local scene website as soon as they are able. Anyone intending to make an audio or video recording of this meeting should let me know at this time. Anyone? Great, thank you. First item on my agenda is signing documents. You want to tell us what needs to be signed, Matt?
Yeah, everything has already been signed by myself. They were all available in the OneDrive to view. We have an invoice from LEC Environmental for wetland delineation on West Street. We have Beals and Thomas for the Sampson's Brook Headwaters Restoration Project, and Kingston Landscaping LLC for work on the Grays Beach Rain Garden.
Nice, okay. All right. Did you say they've all been signed?
Yep, yeah, they were all under 2,000.
All right, super. Can we move on to action items?
You got it.
Good enough. I'll now open a public meeting. Yes, Marilyn?
No, I just moved.
Okay. I'll now open a public meeting to discuss the request for determination of applicability, we call it RDA, for 56 Main Street for the proposed installation of a gravel parking area behind the western building and restoration of a portion of the bordering vegetated wetland and associated 100-foot buffer zone. What have you got to say, Matt?
So we have the representative, John Zimmer, online. I'll just sort of specify that any DOA issued on this would not include the enforcement work, or the restoration work. Any of that would be permitted through issuance of a subsequent enforcement order. So it may be best to just sort of split the discussion between RDA topics and enforcement topics. I didn't think it was necessary to have a separate item on the agenda, but we should sort of treat them separately.
All right, you wanna clarify what the topics are?
Yeah, so John's online and he can present basically the RDA is for work in retro. It's for work that was already completed, installation of a gravel parking area.
Mm-hmm.
And then the restoration work relates to areas of buffer zone and wetland that were impacted by clearing trees and vegetation, storing wood chips, and maybe other debris. But
All right.
John can give a little more background.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Zimmer. You want to unmute yourself, Mr. Zimmer, and you can address us? Thanks. Good evening.
Sure. Good evening. Thank you very much. John Zimmer with South River Environmental. So what we have is an RDA, and I had met Matt on site because there was some question as to whether or not there was an isolated vegetated wetland within the existing gravel parking area. So we went out and took a look at the soils and determined that there was not an isolated wetland there. So we talked about the gravel parking area, which is currently there. The site has been in use for various purposes, from what I understand, for many years. There used to be a structure back there. It's been used for parking as well. But I just don't think that the applicants went through the process with the commission to get the gravel parking area permitted. In addition to that, there's an existing upland area to the rear of the parking area, which transitions into a BBW. The applicants did some work back in that area, cut out a couple of trees that had fallen down through a storm and had, impacted the buffer zone as well as part of the wetland. They had done that work in the winter of last year, I believe, and as soon as they understood that they were in a wetland, they stopped and kind of pulled everything out and left the wood chips and things right where they were. So in talking with Matt, we felt it was best to come in with a restoration plan to not mitigate, but to restore the impacted area. So that's what I prepared and submitted with the RDA. So that I can speak to separately, since it seems as if that should be handled through the enforcement action versus the actual RDA for the parking area. So the parking area is gravel. It is pervious. The area is actually a low point in the property, so the property drains. Actually, would it be easier for me to share my screen so you can see it?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can you folks see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this is 56 Main Street, Crescent Street, Main Street runs up. So this area right here is where the gravel parking lot is. It's actually a low point. There's a berm here, so that effectively stops any drainage from going further back to the wetland, and then the drainage comes from Main Street this way into the property. So all the stormwater that comes down is picked up and basically just infiltrates into the parking area. As part of the restoration plan, we propose to revegetate this area, remove all the chips, and actually put in 3 conservation markers across the back side of the parking area to ensure that there's no further encroachment back there in the future. And then replant the wetland with a mixture of shrubs and trees. There's about 70 stems that we're proposing to be planted in the wetland, and about 65 up in the buffer zone. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, high level. We can take each part separately if you'd like. I can answer questions or provide additional detail. I guess I'd turn it back to you.
How would you like to proceed, Matt?
Let's clarify that Dot just walked in.
Dot's not here by Zoom any longer. She's here in person.
Yeah, the Zoom said I couldn't join unless I updated, and so I updated and it froze.
Awesome, Dot. Thank you, Dot.
And can everybody hear John? I just want to make sure, because the volume seems light, but you can hear? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can just quickly go through my notes on the RDA portion of it. Some of these will overlap because we have one plan for both, but the plan is not stamped or signed. Wetlands have not been delineated. The wetland border is, called out as approximate, but the buffer zone is not. I said the wetland is not typified, but John did in the greater restoration plan text say it is a BVW and listed the dominant species. If there were a wetland delineation or assessment report, it should be provided, and that may help with the commission's process. Conservation posts are proposed roughly 40 feet from the approximate wetland boundary. The parking lot, as John said, is proposed or is in an area that was previously disturbed. The extent of that is unclear. We went through a lot of that during enforcement meetings, talking about portions of it were paved, which is definitely true. When we did the test pits to see if there was a IVW, we came across a small area that you could tell there was an asphalt layer that was kind of significantly beneath the gravel right now. But it isn't clear what the extent of that was. I said it's kind of difficult to assess filings after the fact. What we have now is we have a gravel parking area. So rather than assessing the ability to install a gravel parking area, we have a gravel parking area and we don't really know what was there before. My guess, based on aerials, was that other than what happened out in the wetland and the buffer zone, in the area of the parking lot itself, only a few trees were cleared for this work. I suggested, I wasn't sure if there were any photos of the site before and after the work that the applicants had. That might be something that could help the commission make a decision like this. John just specified, one of my notes in my staff report was that it doesn't specify a pervious condition. John just said it's a pervious parking area. This was something that I thought was up for commission discussion. From my memory being on the site in May for the test pits, the gravel is small, roughly pea stone sized to memory. I wasn't sure if that counted as pervious or impervious. From KWPR, impervious surfaces just says surfaces such as compacted soils, sidewalks, roadways, driveways, and rooftops that are resistant to penetration by water or plant roots and do not allow infiltration of water into the ground. WPA does not define what an impervious surface is. But a lot of municipalities that have stormwater utility fees consider gravel driveways and gravel parking areas to be impervious because the continued compaction from vehicles and the gradual filling of gaps between the gravel with sediment eliminates any meaningful recharge. I'm not an engineer. I would suggest that aggregate size probably makes a big difference. I'm not sure if that plays out in their engineering calculations when they do stormwater plans, but it's definitely something I think, the commission should discuss. I'm not suggesting one way or the other. I'm simply saying that since it wasn't in the plan or the RDA that this was a pervious, just simply says gravel, I would think that would be an important consideration. If it's not truly pervious, then that would be a lot more difficult to permit this close to a wetland. Additionally, KWPR has language in there that says impervious surface outside of jurisdiction should be dealt with in a way using stormwater BMPs that stormwater cannot run into jurisdiction and thereby into wetlands and buffer zones without treatment. Here you do have impervious surfaces up gradient closer to the street outside of jurisdiction as well. So those are considerations. It's sort of up for commission discussion as far as does this actually constitute pervious surface or is that questionable? And do you need more information on that? I would say that, in my staff report, I said if this really is pervious, it seems relatively easy to permit, especially considering the disturbed history of the site.
So do we have what we need to proceed at this point, in your opinion?
You have my comments, but
We
my
get your
comments
comments.
had a lot of things that I thought needed some answers
Yeah.
or some questions.
And we wanted photos, but we don't have those, right?
I think all we have for photos is what was taken at the site visit
Okay.
or any time, that I were on the property. And we had some aerial imagery, but that's about it.
All right, can I hear from commissioners on this? Anyone? Marilyn?
Well, I'm curious how, Matt, you think we could go about defining whether that gravel is pervious or impervious?
Right.
As you said, you're not an engineer, I certainly am not, so.
Right, it's a good question, and, I don't think it's as simple an answer as somebody just saying, well, it's gravel. Of course it's pervious. There's plenty of literature out there that treats it as impervious. If it's repeatedly driven on, if it's small aggregate. There have been conditions in past permits issued by the Conservation Commission in Kingston that stated that aggregate size had to be of a certain minimum size. And I think the idea was that the larger the aggregate, the more it resists infill and compaction. again, I'm not sure that there is real engineering data behind that. I don't really have a good answer on that, other than, you know, I question it based on my memory of being on the site months back and seeing that the aggregate size was on the smaller side. So, reason I would bring that up is that if it does not act as truly a pervious surface, then you likely will have more detrimental impacts to those wetlands downslope. You know, a roughly 40-foot area of buffer zone restoration may not be enough to deal with all of the impervious surface that's already out of jurisdiction, and including a large parking area within jurisdiction that, while gravel, may not be pervious.
And just to further clarify, there is a berm that extends basically across the entirety of the lot, so that any stormwater that goes down collects at that low point. Looks like it's elevation 34 in this area. So I think the ability of any stormwater to move through the buffer and into the wetland is fairly limited.
And Mr. Zimmer, is there any engineering data available, like by the manufacturer, on defining this as pervious versus impervious, this material?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Anything else? Ms. Artiano, anything? Apparently not.
So I did go by this site actually since this hearing took place when we had one of the recent large rainstorms. And Mr. Burr is correct, it does turn into a, puddle, if you will, in the back during a large rainstorm, and it's obvious that it's containing the water. And I went back there the next day and it was gone. So, I mean, it does drain into the ground. I don't know, to me, that means it's pervious.
Okay, so that's just your empirical experience tells you that it is. Do we have enough information to proceed to a vote? Do you want to?
Well, there were some other outstanding things in Matt's list, I believe.
Yeah, let's hear them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's up to the commission. I mean, an RDA certainly does not, by nature, require survey grade information, stamped plans, wetland delineation. That's all situational, but it should always be considered. Do you have enough information in front of you to make an informed decision on an RDA based on what's been put in front of you? A DOA doesn't get closed out with a certificate of compliance. In this case, the work is already done. Everything that isn't already done on this plan, and John, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but everything that isn't already done on this plan is going to be dealt with under an enforcement order, not a DOA. This DOA really is just for the gravel parking area that has already been installed without a permit. So is it terribly important that it's not going to be closed out with a COC? I would suggest not. But that's always up to the commission as far as whether, having something in front of you that's not signed and stamped, having a wetland that hasn't been delineated, is something that's been discussed on a lot of different enforcement issues and RDAs before. So I would say the commission is not ever in a situation where they can't issue a permit without those things, where they can't issue a DOA. You would never issue an order of conditions without those things, but a DOA, you have that option one way or the other. If you feel you have enough information in front of you, you absolutely can issue a -3 DOA for the existing gravel parking area. If you feel
Well,
that.
before we do that, I'd like to talk about, or have any action on the DOA, I'd like to talk about the enforcement to understand the entirety of the situation, please.
Yes, Mr. Artiano.
Yeah, I see no issue with switching to
Well,
that
we're
now.
still we're just gonna keep this open for a minute, and then let's, when we hear more about the restoration, it might, color the DOA in a better light.
Sure. Do you want to have John present that?
Right, but before we go there, I just want to make sure there's no other member of the public who wants to chime in at this point. All right. Mrs. Zimmer?
Okay, I can go over some of the specifics about the restoration plan. What we're proposing is to basically hand plant a mixture of trees and shrubs within both the buffer zone and the wetland. Obviously, the wetland species will be all hydrophytic, fairly standard. Oops, I'm sorry, Buzz. Go ahead.
Yeah, you point to where on your screen, can you
Oh,
show us
sure.
what you're talking about? Yeah.
So the impacted wetland is right in this area, and then the buffer zone is here. So like I said, we would remove, any of the remaining wood chips and things that are mainly present within the buffer. There's a little bit in the wetland. All that would be done by hand. And then both the buffer and the wetland would be hand planted with native species, fairly standard red maple, high bush blueberry, sweet pepper bush, plants that are native to the area with high wildlife habitat value. Similarly, for the buffer zone is a mixture of trees and shrubs to reestablish some of the vegetation structure in the area. And then also put in 3 conservation marker posts along the back of the existing gravel driveway, which would preclude further encroachment back into that area. We are proposing to monitor it for a minimum of 2 years to make sure that we have 75% coverage. We would use an upland conservation wildlife seed mix in the buffer and a wetland seed mix in the wetland to promote some additional herbaceous restoration. And then also there is some potential for invasive species colonization. So we built in some monitoring for invasive species and, should we need to manage it, subsequent to the installation of the plantings, we would coordinate back with the commission on the best way to do that, whether it was mechanical removal or, another type of removal. And then, obviously we provide a report, at the end of each growing season to provide the commission with information on the success of the restoration and any recommendations for, additional work that might need to be done. And then the assumption is that the enforcement order would basically remain in place, until that restoration is deemed successful by the commission. One of the things that may be worth considering is subsequent to, or, kind of as part of the enforcement and restoration is incorporation of an as-built plan, which would allow me to go out and delineate the wetland before we start the restoration work, and then provide the commission with basically a document of record moving forward that would kind of cover the site plan considerations that Matt had brought up with respect to the RDA.
Anything else, Commissioner Ratiano?
Thank you, John, for that. I was just gonna suggest that we need an as-built when this is completed, so that later on, at some point, if this comes back to the town, then we actually have a record of, what it was supposed to be like when it was finished.
Yeah.
I'd like to see 2 more, so a total of 5 posts there, just because that is a parking area across that whole delineation, and that way there's no question about where the boundary is there. And then what? And this is just a curious question. So the yellow doesn't seem to go all the way to the, I'm gonna call it the north, but
Right.
is that area still is it already non-disturbed? Is that why?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So I'm, just in my 2 cents, I'm comfortable with the restoration plan. I think it's gonna be a big improvement, especially getting that as-built, that's key. And I'd be fine moving forward with this, and as well as just doing the RDA as it's been submitted. That's my 2 cents.
All right. Anything else from the commission?
Matt, down at the bottom of your recommendations, you commented on a seed mix. Is that,
Yeah, I have some comments if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
I was just writing something down and totally forgot. Similarly to what we just discussed on the RDA, all the same things apply as far as the plan and the wetlands. We already discussed all of that. I had said I assumed this was hand planting only, which John did just confirm. That should be specified either on the plan or in the document we would issue. Just for the record, the restoration work is in relation to enforcement orders issued June 19th of this year under WPA and KWPR, where we required a restoration plan by August 30th. And the restoration plan calls for removal of wood chip piles and debris, revegetation with like native species, installation of conservation posts, and incorporates post-restoration monitoring and invasive species management. It also calls for construction oversight by a wetland scientist or other qualified professional. I already talked a little bit about the commission using an enforcement order to permit work like this as is standard. Enforcement orders like this should set appropriate timelines for completion of the work and state that failure to complete will continue the enforcement process through issuance of fines and/or subsequent EOs. Similarly to when we discussed the RDA, it's up to the commission in each case to make a determination whether they have enough information to make an informed decision. I think for enforcement, in a lot of cases, relatively simple ones, which I think this would fall into, that, the money is better placed towards the actual restoration work and quickly as possible stabilizing the wetlands in the buffer zone. And I did write down that the buffer zone seed mix should be switched to a southeastern Mass focused mix like New England wetland plants, southeastern Mass upland restoration mix, but I can throw that in as a condition. Similarly, the delineation for part of an as-built plan, I think, is a great idea. And like Buzz brought up, a couple more posts certainly isn't going to hurt anything.
Are we ready to move to a motion? Any more questions? Do I hear a motion to accept the request for the RDA and issue a -3 DOA?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right.
Before you call for the vote, I missed the first 5 minutes. Can I vote on this or no?
Yes,
It's okay.
I think he's been given a pretty complete, report. All right, so we have a motion to accept the request for determination of applicability for 56 Main Street.
This is for the DOA, strictly for the gravel. We vote on an EO afterwards.
And issue the -3 DOA. And we have a second. Dot?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Communis, yes. Buzz?
Yes.
And Marilyn?
Yes.
All right, so that part of this passes. Thank you very much. Moving on, Matt?
I would ask John what he thinks an appropriate deadline would be for this work. I would suggest that you probably don't want to be installing anything for a month or so based on temperature conditions, but you'd want to see it installed probably mid to late fall.
Yeah, I would say if we could do a completion date by, say, October 31st, or whatever the last weekday in October would be.
Commissioners, is that all right? That's satisfactory?
Yeah, you could say October 31st, that would work fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll try to get done, obviously, well before then.
And that's a Thursday, so that'd be fine.
Okay, Megan?
Yep.
All right.
For the EO, we talking requiring 2 more posts, requiring the different buffer zone seed mix, and requiring a as-built plan with wetland delineation?
Correct.
That's what I've heard.
Okay.
All right.
So you need a motion on that?
I don't think we need a motion on that, but we can.
I would love a motion on that.
Well, let's see if we can have a motion on what we're requesting the applicant to provide under the executive order.
You're gonna have a motion to issue an enforcement order for what we just discussed.
Well, the enforcement order's already been issued, so I think it would be more of a motion to
Right.
accept the restoration plan
Right.
as submitted with the modifications that Matt just mentioned.
All right, and so a motion to accept the plan with the modifications, do I hear that?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All right. Dot?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Colleen is a yes. Buzz?
Yes,
Marilyn?
Yes.
All right, then that motion also passes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Zimmer.
You're welcome, thank you.
All right. Are we ready to open the meeting on Mass DOT?
We are on hearings. It's
Already?
after 6:45.
Time does fly. All right. All right. All right, this public hearing is on the One Landing Road, notice of intent for the proposed construction of an addition and deck to the existing single-family dwelling within 200-foot riverfront area to the Jones River and buffer zones to wetland resource areas. Do we have a report from you, Matt?
Yes, 1 second. So I'll just read through what we have for updates, since we already dealt with this at a past meeting. Did a site visit on July 23rd, and we did get updated proof of abutter notifications. We had questions on the existing impervious surfaces. We had some recommendations as far as how the project could get under the, basically not requiring a variance. The updated plan really doesn't make much change to that in terms of incorrectly and confusingly showing the before and after impervious surface calculations. So I would say, no matter what, we want that to be updated. It's still splitting things as far as riverfront area and buffer zone to BVW, and it's just not accurate. The plan doesn't show any proposed change to pervious materials, which I had suggested could help reduce the increase in impervious coverage, but it does cut off a corner of the proposed deck to stay out of the 50-foot no structure. And it does show a proposed dry well, which on the plan does not show connectivity to anything, but I do have correspondence from the representative, John Zimmer, which says it will take all of the roof runoff from the existing house and the addition. I said this may provide enough mitigation for the increase in impervious surface, as in theory it would infiltrate most of the impervious surfaces on the property. I can't speak to whether, and I would hope maybe there's a commissioner who would speak to whether the system was designed with sufficient storage. There is detail for this system on the updated plan, but again, I'm not an engineer, so it looks great. I just don't know, is it sized correctly to actually infiltrate that runoff for certain size storms, or is it simply collecting in one spot then to run off the way it would have normally done? The plan does now properly represent land subject to coastal storm flowage and its 100-foot buffer. And as I said, there are no longer any portions of structure located within the 50-foot buffer to any resource area. Administrative record is still not right in terms of the impervious coverage. And as I said, it's unclear whether the dry well is sufficiently designed, but we do not need a variance any longer for the 50-foot no structure. If, like I said, if the dry well is sufficiently sized, it will likely mitigate the increase in impervious coverage. And that's pretty much all I have on that. Do you have any questions?
Do we have any questions from the commission?
I'd like to hear from John Zimmer before I ask
Mr.
any
Zimmer, will
questions.
you proceed?
Sure. Again, John Zimmer, South River Environmental. Basically, Matt summarized things very well. I can share the plan. Okay, so, based on the comments from the last hearing, we modified the layout of the deck such that it is now located outside of all the 50-foot buffer zones. The other significant addition is this dry well, which is going to pick up all of the runoff from the existing structure. So it will result, at the end of the day, in a net decrease in the amount of runoff, impervious surface runoff from the site, because right now, the downspouts from the existing dwelling are basically just going to ground and allowed to run off and infiltrate. Under the proposed condition, all of the impervious surface associated with the existing dwelling, as well as the addition, will be routed into the dry well and infiltrated through there. With respect to the sizing, I don't have a calculation on the sizing from Webby. You know, we could, as a condition of the order, require sizing information to be provided prior to installation to demonstrate that it will be sufficient volume to handle the runoff from the roof. Otherwise, that's pretty much a summary of all the changes that were made subsequent to the last hearing.
Yes, Matt?
So, just to run through, you know, essentially, I feel bad sometimes when some of these projects get kicked down the road, but pretty frequently we'll have a hearing, request 5 things, and get 1 or 2 back. And then, so now you have a situation in front of you where you have to make a decision that a dry well has the potential to mitigate the increase in impervious surface, but when I did my first review, I had to calculate the impervious surface for myself, and we requested that be updated on the plan, and it wasn't. So, again, not advocating one way or the other, I just want the commission to understand that you make a decision right now and you issue a permit, you're making that decision based on a lack of information. You really don't have a plan that shows accurately what the before and after on impervious coverage is. You don't have any sizing data on the dry well, which I would say if it was connecting to 1 or 2 downspouts may not be that big of a deal. You may be able to eyeball it and go, it'll do enough, but when it's connecting to every downspout on the entire structure in addition, that may be a little more concerning. And the other concern would be, and if I missed it, apologies, I just don't see anywhere on the plan that it shows any connection to anything. So all we have for any knowledge of where that dry wall is connecting to is, you know, we have an email from John and we have this hearing where he's discussed it, but as far as the administrative record, that's pretty weak for us. The more information you have down on paper and on these plans, obviously, the better. The administrative record's important. I would typically say, like we just did on the enforcement issue on the last filing, sure, an as-built plan is great for something like a wetland delineation, but for something like a stormwater feature where you want to make sure it's sized appropriately, I'm not sure that an as-built does the trick here if it's not sized properly. If it's not sized properly, then it does not mitigate, at least not to the level that it should, and probably becomes a maintenance issue, I would think, for the landowner. So, again, it's always up to the commission. I just want to make sure you have the understanding that issuing a permit on this right now based on what's in front of you isn't the best idea because the plan is still not up to par.
It's incomplete.
It is incomplete. And it's incomplete partially for reasons that we already called out at the first hearing, and it's incomplete in what was added to the plan because it does not show connections, it does not show sizing, and the very basic thing that I threw out there in the first hearing, which is that any decks and landings could be shown as pervious by specifying a spacing between the boards. That wasn't done either, and at least that would minimize some of the impervious coverage. So I don't have a good recommendation other than I would say continue it and request that they come back with, you know, the full information for the next hearing. And I would say I would want that to be in my office by at least a week before any hearing, and if we don't have it, then I would suggest continuance.
Right. No, I think that's the way we need to go. I don't know if Buzz or anybody else wants to step in, but
Do you have any
Well,
comments?
I agree 100%, but I'd just like to give them a on-the-record, complete checklist of what we want, so when we come back next time and they don't have it, we can just simply open and continue, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. So, if we could just give them a complete checklist of what we're asking for, I think we just give them the checklist and continue the hearing.
Buzz, would you want that verbally, or are you talking an email from me?
No, right now, on the record, yeah.
Well, Matt, do you want me to run through my list and then you can add
Yeah,
to it?
that'd be great, John, yep.
Okay, so I have updated impervious calculations, you know, demonstrating the existing and proposed conditions, sizing information on the dry well, showing connections into the dry well from the roof drains, and specifying the spacing on the deck boards to demonstrate that that's a pervious surface.
Yeah, I would just suggest that the spacing on the deck surfaces was more of a hint than a requirement. But I would suggest it's the best, you know, anybody who's filing, you're trying to show the best possible
Right, how to-
situation, so
It's the best
why
practice,
not show it? So I would say that would be good. And
Okay, what-
just to clarify a little bit of what I was talking about, the impervious surface, you're looking at the entirety of the lot that's within jurisdictional buffer areas and comparing that to the amount of that area that is impervious. And what was done on this was a calculation based on impervious area within 100 feet of BVW, and then separately, something that was done based on riverfront. Really, the entire property is within
Right.
jurisdictional buffer areas. So it should be relatively easy and should be shown as a percentage before and after. So it may be that it's just shown in a really confusing way, but it's not accurately shown. And when I looked at the plan in the first place before this update, it definitely wasn't accurate based on the calculations that I did.
So since your stormwater can extend off of the property based on impervious surfaces, can we just do it for the totality of the lot and not parse it out between the riverfront area and the buffer zones? Is that acceptable?
Yeah, I would suggest that it shouldn't be parsed out between riverfront area and buffer zones, because in KWPR, it's essentially, it's combining those together. So it doesn't really make sense to split them out. It should be a totality. And any portion of the lot that is within an actual wetland resource area that is not considered a buffer zone should be excluded from the calculation, because those are the resource areas that we're trying to protect with these regulations, so we wouldn't allow those to be impervious in the first place.
You mean the water doesn't follow the lines on the plan?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's easy enough. What would you like to see for the spacing on the decking?
I think we've said in the past, our standard for minimum is 3/8 inch for pervious decking.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right, we should be able to get this information done and back to you by next Wednesday. So I'm not sure when's the next hearing after tonight?
Next is August 28th.
Okay.
We were gonna bring up the fact that there was only one issue on the agenda that night, that was enforcement. So not putting anything else on that could allow the commission to skip a meeting, but, you know, it is
Why
what it,
would we want
it is
to
what
do
it is,
that?
so.
What else do we have to do? All right,
So are we ready for a motion to continue?
do we have anything else to add to Mr. Zimmer's list?
I don't believe so.
No, Buzz? No. All right, do I hear a motion to continue this to August 28th for hearing?
I'll make the motion to continue to August 28th.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue this matter to the 28th of August at 6:30. Mr. Zimmer, thank you very much.
Great.
Oh, no, let me take a vote. Just saying, to be fair. Dot,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Kalina's a yes, Buzz,
Yes.
and Marilyn.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, the
Thanks.
motion passes. We'll see you on the 28th.
Sounds good, thanks very much.
Thanks, Mr. Zimmer. It's always good to have an actual count. Are we ready to go to the public meeting on the Mass DOT?
Yes.
All right. So I'll now open a public meeting to discuss the extension request for Mass DOT. What have you got to say, Matt?
This is a reoccurring filing from MassDOT to do basic maintenance to roadside areas, outfalls, culverts, things like that. Any major work, they do file separately, like they did with the outfall on 3A last year. So I really don't have anything on this. I don't see a reason to rehash any of it. DOT, in my opinion, in my tenure here, has been very responsive to any issues that we have with anything that they do. So I would feel comfortable issuing this extension for 3 years.
Is there a representative from DOT?
Not expected.
Are there any commissioners want to make a comment on this? And are there any comments from the public present online or in person? Okay. So do I have a motion to approve the extension request for the Mass DOT?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Okay, made by Marilyn, seconded by Dot, and to accept the request, and Dot,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Colleen is a yes, Buzz? Buzz?
Yes. Yes, sorry.
Marilyn?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes and the extension request is accepted. All right, thanks a lot. Let's see what else we have here. All right.
15 Kingston?
Yeah, look and see. Yep. On action items, do we have that request for a certificate of compliance on 15 Kingston Street? What have you got to say, Matt?
So we've got a engineer's letter and as-built from Kevin Grady certifying the project has been completed in substantial compliance with the OOCs and plan of record. Kevin had inspected the site on July 18th, 2024. Juliana and I inspected the site today with John Zimmer, the wetland scientist, and I don't see Kevin online tonight. Discrepancies that I saw in the as-built plan included a shed on blocks and what was called electric mounted on board. I said these were in an area that was lawn in the proposal and the plan of record, and they are outside of any relevant setbacks like the 50-foot no structure, but it's unclear whether they affect impervious surface percentages. This project was approved at 14.9% impervious surface within jurisdictional buffers. The as-built plan states that the as-built impervious coverage is 15.5%, which is, it's a little bit confusing because it looks even like the portion of pervious driveway was built larger than it was in the proposed plan, but the percent impervious coverage ended up higher, and I don't know if that's including the shed, and it looked like just a small concrete pad for pool equipment. I should note the as-built plan impervious reference states that the approved impervious coverage from this project, which was file number SE 0370937, as 17%, but to my records, that was for the previous filing, SE 0370921, which was not built on. 0937 was approved with an impervious coverage at 14.9, which is below the KWPR limit of 15. Little bit confusing on that one. When we issued the orders of conditions for 0937, we did specify that they were in conjunction with and did not supersede 0921, so that they would keep the perpetual conditions rather than just issuing them separately with the new one. So a little confusing on that. My recommendation was that the applicant's representatives review the impervious surface calculations for accuracy, including unpermitted discrepancies, and they should review the permitting documents to be sure that the approved impervious coverage on the plan is accurate. We did get an updated plan emailed to us today, I want to say at 4 o'clock or 4:30. I haven't looked at it yet. I'm told that that might have fixed some of those things, but I haven't been able to review that. I also said all perpetual conditions that were listed in the OOCs for 0921 and 0937 should be specified in any COC issued. The perpetual conditions in 0937 stated that the OOCs were issued in conjunction with 0921, not to supersede it, and that all perpetual conditions in 0921 should remain in perpetuity. The perpetual conditions from 0921 included maintenance of conservation posts and minimization of chemical use on the property, including keeping detailed records of chemical applications. So I haven't reviewed the most recent thing that was sent to us. I would suggest that when I said shed on blocks, that was in parentheses on the plan, I suppose, to indicate that somehow that would mean that it didn't need permitting or that it didn't provide impervious surface. And I did see it today. I can pull up pictures if you like. It is high on blocks. It is on several blocks. In theory, could be considered pervious, assuming that everything could drain under it. I don't know that for sure. I would say either way, it's something that would need permitting from Conservation Commission. I should note, as far as the building department is concerned, any sheds under 200 square feet do not need a permit, but we don't have the same specifications for conservation. It's, it is a structure, it needs permitting. As I said, it is outside of the 50-foot, no structures, so it's not a consideration of that, more a consideration of that this project was already permitted at or near the 15% impervious surface maximum under KWPR, which, based on the as-built plan, was already over. And I'm not sure whether that included the shed or not. So if it's not impervious, then it's not as much of a consideration there, but would still need permitting, rather than to just issue a COC and say, yes, all this is fine, when something was not on the plan of record. I would suggest it would need further permitting.
Is there,
You
I'm
have to
sorry.
come up here.
Is there a representative who has?
Yeah, I'm just gonna make.
Come on
a
up,
comment.
yep.
I'm not really too involved in this project, but one of my companies deal with
Okay,
it.
just identify yourself for the
Jeff
record, if you
McKinnon.
will. I'm sorry.
Jeff McKinnon, 375 Elm Street resident.
Thank you.
I'm the president of the Harley Phil LLC that owns,
Okay.
built this property. I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, but and I don't know where, maybe there was a disconnection between Kevin Grady and the conservation agent, or Conservation Commission, but we doubled the size of the impervious driveway to take into account the shed. The shed was not part of our scope of work, but it was more like an addition, not even an addition, but it was an add-on that was brought into the property after we finished by the buyers, after they purchased the property. And we went through all this with him very specifically, and we, basically forced him to pay, basically had to redo most of his driveway, brand new driveway. So, there's gotta be something that maybe Kevin and Matt can figure out with that.
Okay, so given the discrepancies, what does the commission want to do with this?
Well, I don't think we issue anything tonight. I think we need clarification. It's pretty straight ahead.
Yeah, I would say there's been a lot of permitting on this parcel. we may have issued 3 OOCs, or at least 2 with an amendment and some DOAs, so there's been a lot of moving parts. Like I said, I did notice the discrepancy in the right direction with the pervious coverage on the driveway. I don't recall talking to anybody about that, but let me get with them and see where this is all at and see how to go forward. Let's kick it to the 28th.
Before we go forward with the motion, perhaps to continue, I'd like to know if there are any members of the public, either present or online, who would like to weigh in on this?
Matt, I just have a question.
Okay.
In these pictures that you posted or somebody posted, there's grass clippings and old plantings and,
Yeah, I did, and I want to run through that with Kevin and with the homeowner and just see. It's directly across the street from the house, but I don't know if it was them.
I was gonna ask where,
Essentially, what is you know, if anybody was here for the original permitting of these properties, there was a culvert that carried a stream underneath the road and through the properties out to the stream out back. And when these properties were cleared, that pipe was crushed. It was a old corrugated metal pipe that was put in likely way before the wetlands regulations. And it was replaced with a concrete pipe. Well, at this point, the road has a sinkhole, small sinkhole in the middle of it because the pipe in the road has subsided. So there's going to be a need to replace that pipe within the road, which is why I was there across the street the other day and just saw what looks like somebody dumping landscape materials across the street, which is, 5 feet from where that stream daylights. So just something that I wanted to make sure that I discuss with the homeowner and his representatives to make sure that if it was them or their landscapers, that they understand that's not allowed.
just wanna make sure.
But
it
that's
wasn't,
why I
like,
threw it in there,
behind
so I
the
didn't
fence.
forget. So thanks, Megan.
You're welcome.
Do I hear a motion to continue this matter?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
So we have a motion to continue this to August 28th at 6:30. It's been seconded. Dot?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Colleen is a yes. Buzz?
Yes,
Marilyn?
Yes.
All right. So we're going to continue this till the 28th, and we'll see then. Okay. We ready to move on to enforcement?
Sure.
All right. We're going to move on to enforcement, and the first matter is 28 Rebeth Road.
Can I give this a stab?
Yeah, please. Matt, did you
Just-
notice what I did there? I said the way you say it.
No, I didn't, but now I see it. That's mocking.
No, it's a.
Just for the record, as I've prepared paperwork on this one, everything was under 28, but this is actually 28 and 30 Ravith Road. They're both properties owned by the same owner, just for the record. This is in review of the restoration plan that was filed after an enforcement order was issued for unpermitted work in commission jurisdiction by Smelt Brook, and Smelt Pond. But at the last meeting, I hadn't had time to review the updated plan. I have since had time to review that. It is appropriate for restoration of the site as well as for limiting further encroachment on Smelt Brook. All the species proposed are now appropriate. I did a site visit on July 16th, confirmed that the site is stable. There's no current concern for sedimentation of Smelt Brook. As far as recommendations, similar to what we discussed earlier, the commission should not ever permit enforcement-related restoration or mitigation through anything other than an enforcement order, and we should set appropriate timelines for completion of work. Where failure to complete will continue the enforcement process through issuance of fines and/or subsequent EOs. The one thing that I've noted is the restoration seed mix should be switched to a Southeastern Mass focused mix, like New England Wetland Plants, Southeastern Mass Upland Restoration Mix. Timeline for installation, again, I would say late fall is best. We could hear from the representative, but I think really any time late fall is fine. The last one we did was October 31st. If that's agreeable, we could do that. Otherwise, we could kick it out further into November. Even early December would be fine for this region. And I would suggest not installing before mid-September based on heat.
Okay. Could we hear from you, please?
Yes, Brian
Did you
Taylor
want-
from Stenbeck and Taylor in Marshfield.
Thank you.
As Matt said, I concur with everything he said. We have no issue with the October 31 timeline. That should work out well. And I want to thank Matt for turning us on to that local indigenous species specification. That was a real asset. Oh, and we're also going to be adding half a dozen conservation posts on the side of the existing gravel drive. And we'll get those in by October 31st as well.
Okay. Any comments from the commission?
So, just quickly, because this came up earlier, we, on 56 Main Street, amended, or voted to amend the original enforcement order. That was a discussion that Marilyn and I were having earlier about what's appropriate and what's not as far as process, and to tell you the truth, I don't know. We've always issued new enforcement orders each time. I don't know if that makes the record more or less clear. So, if we want to go that route for tonight, let's go that route. We'll amend rather than issue new ones. I plan just to follow up with town council and just make sure that we know what we should be doing as far as that goes. So,
Do you have a comment on that,
Whatever pleases the commission.
commissioners? Want to amend or issue a new enforcement order?
Man, seems okay.
I would say we did it
Yeah, we did.
for
so
56
let's-
Main. Let's run with it tonight, and if
consistent
council
and-
says don't do that, we won't do it again.
Right.
I don't honestly see much difference other than, I guess I've never done it before, so I would question the procedure on amending it. But in terms of your vote, it's the same. You're either voting to issue or voting to amend, so it's
Would
fine.
you say we need to vote to accept the restoration plan, or just roll it all in one?
I would say, yeah, sort of the point of this is to accept the restoration plan. That's my recommendation, is accepting the restoration plan. It's just a matter of, after that, whether we issued an enforcement order or modified an existing one.
So the motion would be to accept the restoration plan? Is that what you're asking?
I suppose, I mean, we've never really done that. I don't know if it's necessary or not. I mean, the whole concept is we're discussing it and the commission asks questions, and I would say by issuing an enforcement order requiring, or by modifying an enforcement order requiring that work that's on the plan to happen, you are implying support for that enforcement order, for that restoration plan, right?
Sure.
If you want a separate vote on it, you can do that too.
No?
I like votes.
I don't think we need a vote on that.
No, let's just roll it all in.
Just throw it into amendment.
Okay.
Mhm.
Your approval is implicit.
Right. And what about Elm Street? Are we done with Raboth Road?
We're gonna vote on an amendment for this one, right?
Right.
Somebody's gonna make a motion to amend the
Okay.
enforcement
Do we have a
order.
motion?
Does anybody else want to make this motion?
Doesn't matter, Marilyn.
I'll move that we amend the enforcement order with this restoration plan.
All right, do we have a second?
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion to accept the restoration plan
With a deadline of October 31st?
Right.
with a deadline of October 31st. Okay, Dot?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Clean as a yes. Buzz?
Yes,
Marilyn?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes, thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night,
Night.
be well. What about 375 Elm Street?
Yep, Jeff's here for 375 Elm Street. I can give a quick breakdown on
All
that.
right,
We dealt with this one at the last hearing. This was, an enforcement order was issued for failure to comply with a previously issued enforcement order requiring restoration of the buffer zone vernal pool that had been modified, and the commission had me issue a $300 fine and an enforcement order requiring an update to the restoration plan. The deadline for that was July 15th. No update was reached by July 15th, so we started issuing daily fines. We sent out several batches of those. I received the update on the restoration plan on August 8th. So after that, we set up a site visit Juliana and I went to the site today with John Zimmer, who's the wetland scientist on the project. I should back up and say his update said that everything had grown in sufficiently, or was in the process of growing in sufficiently. And when we were on the site visit today, he said he thought it would be about another year. John, correct me if I'm wrong. I think he said about a year or two and everything would be back the way it was. Everything seems to be reestablishing with native species. We discussed a little bit the potential for speeding up the process by hand planting some shrubs within, the area of where there was a kind of skid road that goes through. John had suggested conservation posts, but the conservation posts were already in an order of conditions that was issued for the property. But similarly to other things, you may want, any amendment to an enforcement order to include the conservation posts, just to mandate that they get done by a certain date instead of being part of an OOC that could take 3 years to complete.
What were the daily fines?
$300 a day. So I believe the first batch was, and this is off the top of my head, I think the first batch was $3,600, the second batch was $2,700, and I have the 6th and 7th here today. If Jeff can sign it, then I can consider that issued. So I think the total was $7,000.
Okay. If you want to come up.
Jeff McKinnon, 375 Elm Street, Kingston.
Thank you. Do you have anything more to add to what Matt presented?
I think my biggest pill to swallow with this whole thing is I was followed up with an email from Conservation, not Matt, but someone else, and she had asked me about completing the order conditions, and I said, listen, I think it's grown in sufficiently. There was no excavation disturbance. It was just like cutting of underbrush under the trees. No trees were taken down. There was no like major disturbances to the topography of the land. There was no disturbances to the topography of the land. I guess in the eyes of the law that I'm being fined for something that I now don't have to do. So not necessarily, to the extent that it was originally proposed. But I'm not sitting here saying I don't want to do anything. I mean, well, I don't want to do anything, but I'm willing to be reasonable and work with the board. And Mr. Zimmer, I had a brief conversation with him today post their site visit, and he ran a few things by me, and I thought that was acceptable. Mm-hmm. Again, there was no disturbance directly to anything. I mean, I bought this property, 2 acres of land, thinking I could do all kinds of great things with it. I wanted to put a barn out back, and for my cars and things that I have or whatever. And I can no longer do that because the town just recently changed the no disturb from a vernal pool to 200 feet radius, which is, I don't know off the top of my head, but that's like an acre of land. If you do a radius of 200 feet circle, how many square feet that is? It's probably more, but it's pretty nasty pill to swallow when you just bought 2 acres of land in Kingston for a pretty hefty sum of money, and you can no longer use half of it. So I think that's like my biggest, my hardest pill to swallow. I'm definitely irritated with the whole, constable coming to my house with the fines, with the gun and the badge and the cruiser. I mean, I just think I think that was a push. I responded to the first 2 fines that I got, certified mail, which I think is probably procedure. I don't think anyone here would appreciate a guy dressed in black with a gun and a badge in a police cruiser coming up to your house saying, these are your fines. I wasn't even home, but my girlfriend that lives with me, she has no idea what's going on. So I had a big problem with that. I've sent every single fine that I've received down to Plymouth District for an appeal. Again, I don't want to get in an argument with you guys. I want to move forward from this, but you know, to sit here and think that I deserve a $7,000 fine for, essentially, I just wanted to clean up the woods, you know, that's it. That's all I wanted to do. I wasn't being negligent. I have 10 years of law enforcement, and I think there's a fine line between an accident or a misunderstanding and being negligent. You know, I didn't go in with a bulldozer and, you know, clear the place. I didn't take trees down. I was actually going to take a lot of trees down back there, and I can't because of this no setback, no disturb from the vernal pool. So I've given up a lot already, just in the 2 short years of living here. So, you know, that's it. That's my speech.
All right. Why don't you stay, because the commission might have some questions for you. Any questions?
I can just clarify a couple things. One is on the 200-foot setback. Just for the record, that wasn't changed. That was something that we made a statement on that we were going to start enforcing because it hadn't been. So that was something that, just for the record, was already on.
It was established.
It was already established.
On the book?
You know, I get it.
Okay, it wasn't something I looked into. That's what I was told by somebody at an engineering firm, so.
Right. The problem here was that a plan was put together that showed there were 3 certified vernal pools out behind, either between the back of your property and the adjacent property, and one that was the closest to your house was shown on an engineering plan as being an IVW as opposed to being a vernal pool. So that's where I think you ended up in a situation where it looked like you could stay out of our jurisdiction and do a bunch of work that now you can't because it's actually a vernal pool. And in terms of the work went within 40 feet of that pool, so still would have been in jurisdiction.
Right.
And I understand what you're saying about not clearing trees and not changing topography, but vegetation was cut, small trees were cut, topsoil or leaf litter was skidded off. Like, it was work, and as we talked about during the enforcement issue for the first hearing on this, it was work that had a high likelihood of damaging obligate vernal pool species overwintering. So it was something that did damage. You were here for that hearing where it was determined that an enforcement order would be issued for the restoration plan work.
Right.
So you had John put together a restoration plan, were given a deadline. The real thing that happened was my office didn't follow up with the early deadlines because we lost it in our paperwork for probably 6 months. So that's
When I
where
got the
all the
email
commission
from-
wanted was
Right.
for that work to get done, and it didn't get done. So that's where eventually you end up with a situation of
Right.
the daily fines being issued because there was another deadline that was given that wasn't followed, and we still tried to reach out and give you as much notice on that as we could.
So when you guys reached out to me the first time, that's when I reached out to Kevin. I mean, me and Kevin Grady, we share an office, so it's not, the communication is not difficult. And I said, what do you think? I said, and that's when I voiced to him, I said, I think everything's grown back. He took a glance at, it wasn't anything like formal, but I believe he took a glance at it. And he agreed with me. And then, obviously John's extremely busy. I don't expect anyone to jump, So there was definitely a lag period in between, the time that we got an email from Conservation looking for an update. And then, again, we pretty much, I'm fairly confident that we immediately Kevin immediately reached out to Mr. Zimmer to, assist us with the site visit and putting together a report that says this work that we originally thought you needed to do is no longer necessary based on regrowth, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so I'll just state that enforcement is not something that I like doing. It's the least favorite part of this job. I absolutely don't want to do it, but it's something that I feel I have to do as part of my job based on commission requirements that we uphold our regulations. So as far as us enforcing this and issuing daily fines, that's why I have to do that, and I don't enjoy it. And and I tried to explain this by email, but using the magistrate for daily fines to me is a lot more effective than certified mail based on the fact we have 15 days after a violation to get citations to you. Otherwise, procedurally, they can just be wiped. If I get them to you 15 days, more than 15 days after the offense, they're not valid. So rather than me send one out every single day by certified mail, which costs $10 per letter for the town, I can batch them by a week or 10 days, have the magistrate deliver them at no cost to the town, and I know that they get there on time to you. So it is something, and we've discussed this with the commission before, because I get it, the appearances of having somebody show up and knock on your door. It's really just supposed to be delivery. It's not intimidation or policing. That's a valid way for the town to get information to people and document that you got it on time.
I think the thing that gets me the most is you sent the first two certified mail, and I took them and I sent them immediately down for an appeal.
Right.
To a point where you guys even reached out and said, hey, this, did you get this or whatever? Yes, I did. I sent it for appeal. Oh, okay. So I notified you that you were communicated that I did get it, and then you just decided to have the constable come to my house and try to serve me in hand, which, I mean,
But you understand the difference
No, I
between the two,
understand, but
because
I-
one is a one-time fine of $300.
I understand
So
that.
I have 15 days to do that, as opposed to a batch of 10 days. Each day is its own violation.
no, I understand that.
So the first day that I send out to you, if I don't get that to you by 15 days, is invalid. That's why I use the constable in that situation. And honestly, I choose to use it in other situations, because sometimes I don't find out that certified mail didn't get to somebody for 2 weeks. It's just not an effective mechanism for delivering. So it's something that in some situations I choose to use. And again, I apologize for any, I understand that you didn't like it, and I'm sensitive to that, which is why I did not issue these ones, because I figured I'd probably see you and you can sign for this yourself, and that would make it issued.
I mean, the other thing too is the first fine that I got was the max fine. So we jumped right to the max.
How do you
For the
mean by
The
that?
first fine you issued me was the max fine.
You talking about the $300?
Yes.
There is no more 100, 200, 300.
I'm
It's
just
just
telling you.
it's
that
just
it
300.
says up to the maximum fine. The language says up to. So,
Yeah, in our regulations and bylaw now, it's $300. It's $300 or nothing. It's $300 per violation per day, because each day that a violation continues is its own violation.
well, I'll just end with this, but I'm looking to, I would like to ask the board to take back the violations and let's move forward with this. Again, I've sent them all down for an appeal, individually. So, we can go that route. I really don't want to. It's gonna cost the town a lot of money. I don't really wanna go that route. I'd rather just get forward and, let's just work through this and get it wrapped up. I mean, the work that Mr. Zimmer said today that we discussed doesn't seem like a far fetch. I mean, if you guys want us to wait till the middle of September because of the heat to perform it, fine. But, I mean, I'll do it in a week, just get past it. I mean,
May I ask?
that's my proposal.
I understand your aggravation. I don't think you understand ours. There was an enforcement order issued initially. We spoke to you, we went back and forth, we spoke about restoration work, we gave you a timeline. He's admitted that it lost in paperwork. Where I don't understand is why you didn't do any of the work initially. That was officially asked for or initially
Just
asked
an
for.
oversight.
Right, so now here we are.
Right, no, I understand. I get where we
So
are. I
I am
totally
not
understand
comfortable
where we are.
taking back anything that we once ordered to be done.
I understand where we are. I'm just looking to move past it. So we can, you guys can sit here and say that, you're not gonna take any of the fines back and whatever, that's fine. Then we'll fight them in court. I don't wanna do that, but, I would think that we could work it out, but, I mean, it is what it is.
I'd like to address for just 1 second. I understand that your sense that the service was onerous, and it was having, a sheriff come and provide service of process in the manner that they did. However,
I mean, he didn't even serve it in hand. He didn't even give it to the owner. Just gave it to somebody that answered the door.
Yeah, not sufficient under the law, and that the fine is burdensome. But from the commission's point of view, when orders are issued and not responded to, we really have to have devices at our disposal.
But we did respond. We responded by email, phone, everything. I mean,
There-
I told the woman, I just don't remember her name, who I was communicating with in the conservation office, but she was told that we had contacted Mr. Zimmer, or I had contacted Kevin Grady and Mr. Zimmer about, taking care of this issue. And it just kept coming. I mean, it's not like I was, again, I think there's a fine line between,
May I say
not an
something?
accident, but, there's, negligence, and I don't think this falls under that category.
May
I
I?
just want to let Matt
I
have
was
a-
going to reference the timeline. Do you have that with you? The timeline that,
I don't have that with me.
because I
and
do.
Okay.
Just, may I
But
briefly,
you go, yeah.
before that, just to be fair, because what you're discussing is, so Juliana was going through her list of, we have a tracking sheet for filings, and she realized that, so we issued an order of conditions for some work at 375 Elm Street, that we had no proof of recording yet. So she has something where after a certain period of time, she'll reach out and just say, hey, we haven't received proof of recording, just wanted to let you know. And Jeff said, well, I haven't started any of the work yet, which is valid, that's fine. And then she followed up when she realized this May deadline had passed for the restoration work and said, so, you have this restoration enforcement order that wasn't done. And Jeff responded with, well, I think everything's grown back in and I didn't really cut any trees, so I don't really understand why I would need to do anything if I'm, forgive me if I'm paraphrasing that, but we had the same conversation the next day
Right.
on Kingston Street where I said, do you understand? And you sort of said, not really. Well, the enforcement order was issued, basically the commission voted to issue the enforcement order. We issued it from my office that said by November 30th of last year, you had to do the work that was involved in that restoration plan. That's it. And that stated that if that wasn't done by November 30th, the next day, my office would start issuing fines every day of $300 until that was done. And that didn't happen because of calendar oversight from our office, because it was basically 6 months before we figured that out again. At that point, I told you it was going to be discussed at the next meeting with the commission, and you didn't show up to discuss that with the commission, but at that point, the commission issued another enforcement order
Yeah, which I
that said that
honestly
you
God, I
had
didn't
until
know I had
July
to be here.
15th
Excuse me,
to
Madam
come up with an
Chair.
update.
I have to go.
Thank you very much, Dot. Let the record reflect that Commissioner Dot is having to leave.
So at that, and I let you know that by email as well before we even issued that document, that you had until July 15th to come up with an update. And the reason why that update, partially the reason why that update came forward was because even though you weren't here, I gave them the information you had given me verbally earlier, which is that you felt that the area had revegetated naturally well enough. So the commission came up with a decision they did to have your wetland scientist come up with an update that was as simple as having him show up at the site, review, and modify what he had already written. And I think there was roughly a month for that to happen by July 15th, and that didn't happen. So that's why we're here where we are. It's not that the commission doesn't want to put something behind,
No,
but
I
I also
get
don't
all that.
necessarily want to hear that you did everything you were supposed to do or that you were responsive, because you weren't. And we tried in my office to give you as much warning as possible. Juliana emailed you 2 weeks before July 15th, 1 week before, 2 days before.
Yeah,
just to kind of give you that.
I don't know
hey,
when we reached out to, I don't know when exactly I reached out to Kevin, but I can certainly tell you it was a lot less time than it was well before the 15th to get this, amended, basically. I would call it an amendment to the restoration.
But
At this-
it sounds like you reached out to Kevin, but you didn't communicate with the office and you missed the deadline.
No, I understand all that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no, I'm not, I apologize.
And again, the commission uses citations and enforcement orders not to punish people, to compel compliance. So the reason why in the first place you were required to come up with a restoration plan was because the vernal pool buffer that was vegetated naturally was not anymore, it had been disturbed. The commission wanted to see that fixed through hand planting of different plants with a deadline on it. That wasn't done. That's why, so the fact that a year later, it's in a better condition than it is on the path towards revegetating is good, but that doesn't mean the commission had no right in the first place to issue an enforcement order to require a restoration plan, because they want to see that habitat restored as quickly as possible, not to wait around for a couple of years and see how it goes. In some cases, they do that. In other cases, in a vernal pool buffer, they're not going to do that. They're going to require that that is fixed as soon as possible.
All right, we ready to move to a vote?
I'm just biting my tongue.
Hmm?
Okay. Does any commissioner have questions about anything, or?
No?
I mean, John and I on site today discussed a couple of things that I brought up earlier. New enforcement order, or I'm sorry, an amended enforcement order could be voted and issued to require the conservation posts as shown on the plan of record for the orders of conditions. In addition to that, we talked about the potential for planting some shrubs just along the center of the old path or skid trail that had gone through there to speed the process up. You know, the situation is what it is right now in terms of jurisdiction, and there is a plan of record for the orders of conditions that shows, you know, essentially what will be the no-touch buffer to that vernal pool. So the quicker we can get to where that's stabilized and there's a plan of, an as-built plan of record for that, great. The commission can do whatever they want with fines. Fines are intended to produce compliance. We at least have compliance now in terms of we have the plan update. So we've issued roughly $7,000 in citations that Jeff obviously has every right to appeal, and you can see how things go with the magistrate. Or the commission can say, well, we got the update to the restoration plan. We're willing to wipe all or some of those fines. You can do whatever you want. Either way, I say we should be issuing some update looking to have whatever needs to be done wrapped up by a certain date so that at least protections-wise, we can be done.
Yeah, trust me, I understand that there was some, you know, disagreement or whatever, and I'm happy to pay something. I just
What
think
are you
that
willing to pay?
$100 a day.
Which will total what?
2,400? Was it 24 days?
Pull the calendar up.
That would be $2,333 a day. I mean, total.
Thank you, Bob.
$2,333. I'll make a motion to make the fines $2,000 flat fee.
I'd rather see 2,500, given that it was 7,000.
I'll meet you in the middle at 2,500.
All right, 25 works for me.
All right, well, there's a motion, Jeff, to amend the enforcement order to be $2,500 in fines. Do I have a second?
So not amending the enforcement order on that, two separate things.
Two separate things, right?
Yeah, so you.
Right.
Not
would be-
amending the enforcement
Yeah,
order.
we'll do the amending the
amending
enforcement
fine,
order in a minute.
the
You
amount of
would
fines.
be,
But I would move that we accept the dropping of the 7,000 total and accepting the $2,500 total. To be paid by what deadline, Matt?
30 days from today. I mean, I'll pay it sooner than that, but I think that's, right?
Just like the gas bill, huh?
Gas bill?
You know, you have to pay
Oh.
within 30 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, right.
So we have a motion to amend the $7,000 fine to $2,500. Do I have a second?
Due in 30 days.
Due in 30 days?
Well, why don't we give a date of September 6th, please? That's 20, that's
Due
like
by
24 days.
September 6th?
That's fine.
Okay. So it has a little friendly amendment. And so the motion is to amend the $7,000 fine to $2,500 due by September 6th. Do I have a second?
can I
Do you
ask a
wanna-
clarifying question on that?
Please.
Is the assumption here that if it's not paid, it just goes back to the regular amount and he can go forward with appealing to the
Go for
magistrate?
it.
Just want to have that clarified. So essentially what you're saying is you'll accept less money?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, I'd like to table this for just a second, because if we vote to amend the fine, but then also have a caveat that it increases again if it's not paid on September 6th.
Well, it's the original amount. It'll go back to the original amount.
Yeah, basically the way this works, the way I imagine this will work is something similar has happened in the past, whereby an amount of fines was issued, they were not paid,
We
I
just want to be
forget
careful
if
with
they
our
were
language,
appealed
that's
or
all.
not, but it wasn't paid. There was a magistrate hearing set. Before the date of the magistrate hearing, an agreement was made with the commission. Then I went to the magistrate with the information that the commission had made an agreement with the person, and there was no longer a need to collect on the fines. And essentially what they said at that point was, okay, we'll take everything and just put it over here. If anything changes, let us know. And they kind of held the fines in limbo in case the agreement fell apart. So I think that would be the way this would go, essentially, is that we're basically making an agreement that if $2,500 is paid,
We'll forgive the rest.
yeah.
Right, so I think the language should be something like, a motion to, reduce the fine to $2,500 contingent upon payment within,
By September 6th.
by September 8th. Okay, so it would be to reduce the $7,000 fine to $2,500 contingent upon payment by that date certain, September 6th. That would be the motion I would recommend.
Okay.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Okay, thanks. Dot had to leave. Megan? No. Megan says no. Kalina says yes. Buzz?
Yeah.
Marilyn?
Yes.
All right. The ayes have it, so we are going to amend that.
Now you're going to amend the enforcement order. Right?
I'm sorry, what?
And I said now we're going to amend the
Yes,
Now we
yes.
need to
enforcement order.
amend the enforcement order.
This one's, I guess, a little trickier. John, if you have any suggestions, speak up. But as I said, it would be pretty easy to amend the enforcement order to include the conservation posts that show up on the plan of record for the OOCs, requiring them by a certain date, maybe October 31st, like we've been saying today. The more tricky thing, I guess, is just sort of what we talked about in terms of shrub planting along that center line.
Is that it?
And I'm happy to do that. You can say that you want that done by October 31st. I'll agree to that. Just to speed that up so we don't just get it done.
Yeah, John, do you have any suggestions on language there?
Yeah, John Zimmer, South River Environmental. What I would recommend is an amendment of the restoration plan to only include 20 native shrubs. I would recommend, maybe high bush blueberry and sweet pepper bush, maybe 10 of each, to be installed along the existing pathway from the limit of the conservation markers down to the vicinity of the vernal pool. But the path kind of goes down and then kind of curls around, as it gets closer to the vernal pool. So I think putting the shrubs in right along the existing path would be the way to go.
I think we can work that into an amended EO motion, easy enough.
So we don't actually have to vote on the language, just on whether to
No,
amend.
I would say you're looking for a motion to amend the EO, to have the conservation posts as described and the planting as described by October 31st.
And do you want that motion to delineate what we just described, or you're just a broader statement?
I think you can just say as described.
Okay.
And not to be performed before September 14th, correct?
Yeah, I would say that's,
Just going with what other
it's,
agreements were.
you could plant any time of year, but your
Yeah,
chances of success are much smaller before mid-September. So I would say,
It's very shaded in there too, but it's your call.
Is this all by
Yeah.
hand?
say again?
By hand?
By hand, yeah.
Do I hear a motion? Does anybody want to articulate a motion?
all right. The motion would be to amend the enforcement order to include the posts that are on the plan of record, the shrub planting as previously described, all to be done by October 31st, and the planting to be along, well, we did say this, along the existing pathway from the limit of the markers to the vicinity of the vernal pool.
By hand.
Planting by hand, yes.
All right,
That cover everything, Matt?
nicely done. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Megan?
Yes.
Colleen is yes. Buzz?
Yes.
And Marilyn?
Yes.
And the ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate
Thank you
it.
for your
Thanks,
courtesy.
Jeff.
All right, we just want to vote on the minutes from June 12th. Everybody have a chance to look at the minutes?
Do we have enough people to vote
Do we-
on some meetings?
Is 4 enough?
So unless, I don't know if Juliana has that in front of her, I don't know
Oh, like who was here and
I
who
think
was
we were
here.
all here.
on the 12th.
Yeah.
You can
According
vote
to
them,
this-
and then if we have to,
We
if
can
we
vote
realize
on it
later that
again.
it doesn't work, we can vote them again.
Okay. So do I hear a motion to approve the minutes for June 12th, 2024?
I'll make that motion.
All right.
Second.
All right, Megan?
Yes.
Colleen is yes, Buzz?
Yes.
And Marilyn?
Yes.
Okay, so the minutes are approved for that. And we got an update on Three Brook?
Yeah, so part of our admin review process is the agent will update the commission at the following meeting about any admin review decisions. We got an admin review request. It says add flower box to block view from road, 2 feet high by 1 foot wide and 15 feet long. This is within the riverfront area. This is very close to the Jones River. I did a site visit. I talked with the applicant and decided it did not meet the admin review guidelines. It really is more of a retaining wall situation. And so I did not approve the admin review form. I said an RDA or another filing would be required.
Can you draw a clearer picture for me, what they want to do?
So the property, so their backyard abuts the Jones River. It is sort of one of the properties that has lawn right up to the edge of the Jones River.
Yeah, right to the edge, yeah.
So I did kind of, while I was there, talk about the benefits of having a vegetated buffer. But their lawn slopes back away from the house. What they were looking to do was they were calling them flower boxes, but really it was like a retaining wall. They want to terrace it so that it's not as steep, which in theory helps with runoff or things like that, but it just doesn't fly under admin review. But they were looking just to have a little more privacy also, because you can sort of see their house from a nearby road. So,
So they went in front of the house, not behind the house?
behind the
towards
house, yeah, it was very close to the river.
Okay.
So I did not approve the admin review, and then I also did find some paperwork on file from a previous conservation agent sending correspondence about an unpermitted dock.
Yeah.
No, I'm stopped, thank you.
And
I
have
remember that,
And I
yeah.
have no real follow-up information on that, so I may need to follow up again about that and see how that went, but that's all I got.
Yeah, I think I remember that there was a dock, but then, I think they took it down, but, anything else?
I don't think so.
Really?
Just thank you for that fence at Blackwater, you and Jim and whoever else did it. Looks
Oh,
great.
I should have put that in updates.
It looks
I was like
amazing. If you haven't
racking
seen
my
it, go
brain to
look.
see updates, so
Yeah.
a couple things on this. And of course, I don't have the name in front of me, so I don't want to get it wrong or butcher the name, but this was from area residents put together a GoFundMe
Yes.
at some point to raise money for kind of the parking area, and we decided we would put that towards fencing. So the money they were able to raise and some money that I had left over from last year's land management, we were able to purchase split rail fencing, and Commissioner Jim Franklin decided he would go down with his boys and install all of it just by themselves.
Looks great.
So, looks great.
Yeah, it looks good.
We are very closely approaching being able to put the ecological restoration of that property out to bid, which is really exciting. We are still waiting on our Chapter 91 permit, which has taken a very, very long time, but we are already working on the bid documents, so that is exciting. Good news is fun.
Yeah.
That is lovely. Thank you. Is there anything else? Then we're going to move on to closing remarks. The next meeting will be held August 28th, 2024, beginning at 6:30 PM. The time is now 8:13 PM. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Make that motion.
I was going to say please.
Second.
Okay. And Megan?
Yes.
Colleen is a yes. Buzz?
Yes.
And Marilyn?
Yes.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank...
Night, everyone.
Night, night, Buzz.